Welcome to The Pilot Life, the show where we sit down with people who are passionate about aviation. My name is Brendan. I've been a commercial airline pilot for over 20 years, and in that time, I've heard some incredible stories. This is the show that I share those with you. Welcome on board. All right, welcome back, fellow pilots, fellow aviators, to the Pilot Life podcast. We are here in Simon Dunn's house. Simon, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brendan. Good to be here.
You know,
in the house.
Yeah, this is. Thank you so much for bringing us in here. So, when I first started this, I kind of wasn't sure how I was going to find people to sit down with, right? Like I had my list of people that I was going to send off stuff to, but then I found what's starting to happen is people who I sit down with, other pilots, are saying, you should sit down with this person. Mm-hmm. And we have a common connection through Captain Larry Packer.
We do.
Right?
Yep. Sorry. Over my head already.
No, this is good. This is good. And so when I sat down with Larry, he said, you should sit down with Simon because he has an incredible story. And I said, great. Well, do you think he would do it? And so he reached out to you and you said, yeah, I think that I would be willing to share. And so thank you so much for taking the time to share that with us.
It's an honor and absolutely no pressure that the Blue Angel, recommended me.
That's right. That's right. Well, so why don't we start off at the beginning? Kind of where you're from. The accent does not sound like it's from California.
No, Texas.
Texas. So let's just start off at the beginning of kind of your aviation roots and kind of where that story started.
Okay. Yeah. Born in England in 1969. I was actually born on a base called Fairford, where the Concorde first flew, the first UK built Concorde, and also the same year. So maybe predestiny,
Yeah.
Grew up on many Royal Air Force bases. My dad was a Air Force navigator. And I don't know, I think it's sometimes people say it's in the blood. I think this was more like a long brainwashing process.
Yeah.
Watching airplanes. My dad took me to air shows, when I was probably 2 years old.
Yeah. And so he was a navigator on what kind of airplane?
He started on most of his career was C-130s.
Oh, it was. Okay.
Yeah. And then various other tours on a plane called an Andover, turboprop. Pembroke. I don't know if you know that airplane. It's a reconnaissance plane. So we were based many different places and growing up around all the airplanes. My dad was really active in getting me on the planes, which was interesting.
That's nice.
He actually got my whole school year, my class, should I say, and he flew us up to this remote Scottish highland up in the Highlands. And the whole class went in the plane, and he just managed to do that one day, and it was pretty cool. Knowing my dad's in the flight deck, and I think I was probably 8 or 9, about the same age as my son now.
Yeah,
close.
So was that your first flight on a C-130 in the back with?
Yeah, that was actually
class?
I think that was on the Andover at the time. Yeah, but we used to, back then we'd run onto the ramp when they'd come back from their tours and climb up in the C-130 and. That smell of an airplane that stays with you.
Yeah,
had that a lot with my dad.
Yeah,
I don't know if that was my first flight. We used to go on vacation on the Air Force planes. It was kind of like non-rev. So.
And was your dad's family? He also had some pilots in his family, right? Was your uncle also a pilot?
Yeah, I call him my uncle. He was basically my dad's mentor, not blood uncle. My dad was actually the first one in his family from Leeds. He grew up. Pretty working class family. I shouldn't say pretty. It was a working class family. And he managed to get out of Leeds through the Air Force. He started as an apprentice, I think, maybe 16 years old.
Your uncle, or the person who you call your uncle?
Yeah, Uncle Bill.
Uncle Bill was your dad's mentor.
Yes. When my dad got commissioned, Bill was a flight sergeant flying. refused many commissions because he wanted to stay flying. He was the true pilot, as I call him. He lived and breathed it. And I was around my dad and my uncle, most family occasions growing up, and I would sit at the dining table and listen to their stories. And Bill had some really good stories, World War II stuff.
Yeah.
He flew in the Berlin airlift. He got shot down in Asia in a Mosquito. Lived with apparently a local tribe hiding from the Japanese.
Wow.
So, and stories of double engine failures that we practice in the sim now and hope never to have happen. He lived it. And even my dad would, there was probably a lot of drink going on, and we would sit there and it would be hours. And, that was really my first, exposure to the danger and passion of flying. My first actual memory of flying is in what we call nursery school in England, which was preschool.
Yeah.
And my mum worked as an assistant teacher there, and a lot of the wives from the C-130 squadron, Hercules as we call them in England, squadron worked there. And I remember hearing a really large boom. Everybody ran to the window, and the C-130 had crashed. It was in a place called RAF Cologne near Bath in England. And but all the women, the wives, were all crying because it was obviously way before cell phones, so there was no information about which husband was flying that plane. And it was close. It was probably within a mile. And then I remember seeing the black smoke and the flames and everything you see on air disaster stuff.
Right.
And that stayed with me, That was one of, I think, 3 air disasters I saw before probably 12. These air shows that we used to go to were a lot less regulated than they are now. And I remember seeing my dad was actually friends with one of the Frecce Tricolori Italian display team. And we were in the mess at, the officers club at Mildenhall. We used to go every year. And I remember this guy. He was a really tall guy with a mustache. And he's the one that crashed the next day. And I remember seeing the plane go over the horizon and then seeing again the black smoke and the flames.
He was part of that flight team?
Yeah, he was. That was the display team. I think the danger of flying was very real to me, but it also came with a sense of adventure. Like my uncle was the first one to tell me the times that you're sitting there, nothing happening, you should be preparing for something to happen, because it will. It's kind of like riding a motorcycle, right? You're eventually going to put it down.
Yeah.
It's not if, it's when.
That's right. Yeah, that's great advice, isn't it?
Yeah, and from somebody that actually experienced it was important.
I think it's harder for aviators, especially in, let's say, airline pilots, because things are so stinking reliable now that you can go an entire aviation career and never deal with an emergency.
Right.
Where those pilots back the World War II era, those airplanes were not nearly as reliable, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's also probably a mentality of how you're going to react as well. The more prepared you are, as we know from doing the emergencies in the sim every year.
So did you was your goal to go into the RAF and do that kind of military flying?
It was, yeah. I had friends that went to fly Tornadoes.
Yeah.
2 friends ahead of me. But my eyesight was not up to the 20/20 that they required back then, uncorrected. Yeah, obviously.
Okay.
So it was kind of disappointing. They said they'd take me as a backseater.
Yeah.
But all the people I spoke to, including Bill, was don't do it because you'll come out with no flight time.
Right.
And they were thinking about phasing out the backseaters as well.
Okay.
Because my dad got phased out as a transport navigator.
Right. Where did you first have your first flight experience?
Oh, that was interesting. That was I was part of a Air Force cadet program. I was sent to boarding school when I was 11. Sounds like sent down. Felt like it.
Right.
What did I do wrong?
That's right. I wasn't going to ask you what you did to get sent to boarding school.
Yeah, I think it was a more along the lines of a Air Force discount. Military kids got really good discounts for private schools. So and also it's a pretty good class thing to talk about in England. My kids at boarding school.
Yeah.
You know, it is. It's a good education.
Yeah.
So, but it was mostly a military school, and they had Air Force cadet program. And coincidentally, my first real flight was at my Uncle Bill's squadron, because he was doing the veteran volunteer for the cadets.
Cool.
So he grabbed me as soon as we all showed up. I was in this big baggy Air Force, clothes that didn't fit me. And he goes, "You're coming with me." And we went up in a Chipmunk, the trainer. And I think all the other kids had like straight and level flight for like 5 minutes, and we were doing barrel rolls and loop-de-loops.
Uncle Bill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I came down and I'm like, that's it.
Yeah.
That was the final clinch for me of what I wanted to do. But it was a long program after that, because I didn't, the Air Force was what I put my heart and soul into. And when I didn't get it, I was kind of drifting.
Yeah.
If you don't have the money in England or the military experience, it's very difficult.
Right. So then did you start to work on your private, or whatever the European equivalent is of that, or did your flying kind of then taper off?
I worked on, my dad left the Air Force during the cutbacks, probably the late 80s, when the Clinton administration was making big cuts. The Brits followed suit. Kind of makes sense with the combination of what they do with the military. Anyway, and they kept trying to make him do a desk job, and he just wanted to fly. So he left early and went to Dubai, which was kind of a dusty small town back in the late 80s.
Yeah.
And he met a Canadian friend, and they were going to start an airline together. And they got pretty close. Everything in Dubai, or back in the United Arab Emirates back then, you need an Arab sponsor to run a business.
Yeah.
And he got it going basically, and then the sponsor pulled the money out.
Oh.
But he was in Dubai, and I get into that story. So I was going to actually fly out. I flew out with my mom. We packed up the house, and I remember the night before I looked in the atlas to see where Dubai was, because it wasn't talked about back then. It was nothing,
How old were you?
I just left college.
Okay.
Yeah. Once I was in Dubai, I had various jobs that helped me make enough money to come back and forth to the States. And, you guys, America, provided me with that opportunity to flight train, which was not only more affordable, but accessible.
So your dad moved to Dubai, you helped your mom pack up.
Yep.
And then you would occasionally fly back to the States to do flight training.
Yeah, stuff happened in between there that delayed it. We'll get to that later.
Yeah, sure. Where did you do your flight training at?
Well, I actually got on I'm going to really age myself here, fax machine from Dubai. And I had, I think Flight Magazine every year had like every flight school, or, that would, and all the addresses and fax numbers. And I think I remember sending like 45 faxes out that night to all these flight schools to see what deal I could get, because I knew I had this set amount of money. Right. And a school in Oklahoma wrote back, and they had accommodation, and they provided it was a 141 package deal. Okay. For foreigners.
And for those who don't know what a fax machine is, you type in a phone number.
Oh, that's right. You got to explain these things.
You type in a phone number, and you would write out your application or whatever.
Yeah.
And then you hit send, and it would run this paper through.
Yep.
And then it would send it to another fax machine over in the U.S. where it'd print out what you just sent. It was like email before there was email.
That's right.
It went over phone lines, and it was...
That's really well explained. Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you put the paper in the wrong way, you just get 100 pieces of blank paper back, because it printed only on one side.
They would charge like $1.50 a page. It was expensive.
Yeah, it was.
Super expensive.
That was on my dad's account back then.
Thank you, Dad. I appreciate that.
Probably still looking for that money.
That's right. That's right. So you get set up with this place in Oklahoma.
Yep.
And did you ever actually make it over there and do any flight training?
I did my private.
Oh, you did?
And that all went fine.
Was that in a Cessna?
Yeah, it was 150s and
okay.
152.
Yeah.
Did the private, and then came back, and I was basically trying to just make my own money to do the flight training as I went along. And then I got interrupted for about a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're getting up here into the late 80s, early 90s. Your parents have moved to Dubai. You're going back and forth to Oklahoma to do your flight. You get your private done,
Yeah.
right? And then are you living in Dubai also, or are you living elsewhere?
Yeah, I'm showing up with a resume that says geography degree on it. Everyone's like, okay, what can you do?
Yeah.
I got hired by a company that were recruiting people to go to Kuwait City in 1993. So that was a year after the first Gulf War.
Right.
So Kuwait City was rebuilding at the time, and myself and German.
So just so people who don't know what happened there in the 90s, Iraq invaded Kuwait. Yeah.
Yep.
And then that resulted in the Gulf War. U.S. and the coalition of 40 or 50 other countries came in and got them back out. Mm-hmm. And so now you're there as they're trying to rebuild that city.
Correct.
Or rebuild that country.
Yeah.
Okay.
And a lot of the Kuwaitis were coming back at that time.
Okay.
They were very happy to be back and safe. But Saddam was still around, of course. Once the coalition had forced the Iraqis back into Iraq, they didn't, Saddam was left in power. So it was an interesting dynamic,
Yeah.
Anyway, so we were, I whisked away on a plane and ended up in Kuwait City at 23 and was given a car. And my first experience of landing there, I was whisked away in a limo and taken to this, like a palace, it was a big building in Kuwait City. And I met with the Minister of Communications, and I was 23. And he gives me this badge and he says, this comes with great responsibility because it's a government ID. It'll get you anywhere you ever need to go in Kuwait. If there's a problem, my phone number's on the back and you call me.
Wow.
Okay. And then, so we had access to go anywhere. So I was there for about 3 or 4 months and working with a German colleague, a gentleman called Kai. Became good friends, but we're 23,
Yeah.
bored. There was no alcohol. There was no things that 23-year-olds are looking for.
Right.
Kind of a party.
Yeah, the college life.
Yeah.
You didn't really have that whole college life experience there.
Right.
Right. It's fairly locked down.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's there. You're there. You're there to work
Right.
and respect their laws.
Right.
And we did.
Yeah.
But the interruption to my flight training came because of that.
Yeah.
We were told by some other Europeans that we met that we could get some whiskey up at the border from the UN base.
Yeah. So there was a UN base on the border of Kuwait and Iraq.
Yes.
And that's like a DMZ, right?
It is. So the way I understand it, between after the wars, after certain wars, they demarcate zone. The DMZ is where they have to go back and negotiate the border.
Okay.
Because there's been incursions, people have taken certain areas.
Right.
So it was called Unicom, and it was a big base in a town called Qasr, which is on the border.
Okay.
That was the first town that the Marines came through to liberate Kuwait.
So you and your buddy get in your car, you've got your government badge, and you say, we're going to go up to this UN base and just see what's going on up there.
Yeah, we were on a day off.
Yeah.
And it was becoming harder and harder to get a day off. The boss we had was wanted us to work 7 days, so it was almost escaping.
Yeah.
On our Saturday, I think it was.
Right.
Friday and Saturday are the weekend in Islamic countries.
Yeah.
And we got in the car, we drove, we got some snacks, filled the car up with snacks, whether in beach shorts and T-shirt.
Yeah.
And with this pass, it enabled us to get through many a checkpoint.
Yeah. Is this day or night?
It's day.
It's daytime. Okay.
It's in the middle. It's getting towards summer, so it's late May, so it's getting pretty hot.
Okay.
And it just felt like an adventure. You're 23, and with a goal at the end. Hey, we can.
Right. Right.
This could be fun.
Yeah.
But even at that age, we're on the so-called highway of death at that point, which is the main highway that runs between Kuwait City and Iraq. And during the war, when the Iraqis tried escaping because they knew the invasion was coming, They drove on this, I think it was a 2-lane, maybe 3-lane highway back to Iraq. And then the coalition air forces were instructed to bomb them as they escaped, because it was, they were military.
Yeah.
So, it was carnage. I've met guys in the airline since then that flew that mission, So it was all very, foreboding, adventure, burnt out tanks we were passing. It was really like a war zone we were driving through. And then the checkpoint started getting more heavily secured, Kuwaiti Army personnel. And we got through with our passes, the promise of, hey, you can go where you want.
Right.
And we did, and we got there, and I remember thinking, this is not feeling right now. But the 23-year-old, I look back stupidly, of course, but we kept going. We got to the base, and subsequently they said that we passed signs for the base, and I believe we did. And I believe there was one that said subject to prosecution if you pass this point. But we had to pass it, so we're like, well, we were okay. We're part of this security.
You were thinking that signs for people who aren't authorized people, who
Correct.
don't have this badge.
Yeah, and also we're pushing the limits at this point.
Yeah.
So we get to the Unicom, the UN base, and we were very quickly turned away by them. And they said, you need to get out of here. This is not the place for you or anyone. This is basically an active war zone, they said.
Right.
And as we got back in our car, I remember turning around the car and saying, yeah, this is not good. We need to leave.
So how big is this base now that you guys come up to? Is it like a massive installation, or is it just...
I would say it's more like a taken over mansion with a high wall around it, like a compound.
Okay.
Yeah, it's certainly something you can't see from the distance. We drove through the town of Rumkasa, which was still bombed out.
Yeah.
Just a destroyed building, basically town.
Yeah.
Which added to the whole neck, the hairs on the back of your neck going okay. And we had the name of somebody there that we were supposed to meet. But they turned us around. So when we tried leaving, and we were in a fairly small street at this point, and we're trying to do a 3-point turn to get out of there, the probably 30 yards down from the gate that we'd gone to, we were surrounded by men with AK-47s that jumped out of the alleyways and buildings.
Were you the passenger or the driver?
I was the driver.
Okay. And your German friend was the passenger?
Yes.
Okay.
And the probably 7 or 8 men in Arab Bedouin outfits, which isn't, not a uniform, Arab dress, with masks on. And they were yelling and screaming. One guy was in front of the car, pointed, the gun pointed right at us. And I remember this very split-second thought, maybe I should just gun it and run him over. And like they say, with adrenaline, everything slows down. I remember looking over at Kai, and he could see what I was thinking, and he just went, no.
Right, because he probably thought, this guy's going to unload on us if we start moving. Yeah,
I think something happened with his sense of danger that was more like, no, we're not doing this.
Yeah.
So we got pulled out of the car, lots of screaming and shouting.
And you're still within range of this base.
We're right outside the base. Like I say, 30 feet down from the gate. We didn't get far. You know. So we were dragged down the street and taken to this, it looked like a checkpoint, like a makeshift checkpoint. And there was a guard hut there. And as we walk in, I look up, or as we're shoved in, there's a picture of Saddam Hussein on the wall and a gentleman with green army fatigues there. And we were shoved in there, and he says, what are you doing here? And we're like, well, we're just tourists. We're kids up here trying to get something from the UN base. And he asked for our passports, and then we had to give him the IDs, which got a lot of interest because they were government IDs.
Yeah.
You know, young guys, short haircuts, government IDs. It didn't look good straight away. So, you know, he's saying, no problem, no problem. It's probably a big mistake, no problem. And then he gets on this old field telephone, and he handed us off to them again. And the gate opened, and they tried shoving us in our car, which was a rental car.
Yeah.
And I remember having my hands on the roof of the car, resisting getting in, because I knew if I got in, we were done for.
Yeah.
You know, these guys were just, you know, reeked of danger and hysteria, basically.
Yeah.
But right about that time, I got hit in the back or the kidney or somewhere with the butt of his rifle, and I buckled over, and it really winded me. And as I'm trying to get back up, a UN Jeep finally screeches to a halt in front of us, and two UN soldiers got out, but they weren't armed.
Yeah.
So the guys, the Arabs that were taking us, screamed and shouted and pointed their guns at them, and it was kind of a standoff. And they were saying, no, they're with us, you got to let them go, and they didn't listen. So we finally got shoved in the car and driven away at high speed into Iraq.
You guys were shoved in the back seat?
Yeah, we were shoved in the back seat, and our heads were shoved down onto the floor. And I remember feeling, as we're bouncing along this desert road, this guy with his pistol in the back of my head, thinking this thing's going to go off, you know. But it was all very chaotic. It was, you know, screeching loud, Arabic music blaring in the car, you know, shouting, screaming, and that was it. We were taken.
So what was going through your mind at that? Was it, okay, I'm done? Was it, okay, this is going to be a short-lived thing, they're going to come and get me? Or
I think it was, I didn't want to be with those guys. It was not, it didn't feel at all safe.
Yeah.
I know, obviously, that seems stupid, but, you know, you're in with an Iraqi officer in that hut. It seemed a bit more, okay,
right.
Speaks English, seems like a stupid mistake, and we can clear this up. Now it just seemed chaotic. We were driven then to a kind of compound with another 30 or 40 guys like them, all civilians, and kind of roughed up. We were kind of trophies at that point. And then we were taken into a room, and they did a mock execution on us to find it very funny. And then we were dragged out again and handed off to two men who were, I believe, secret police, Mukhabarat, they were called, in Iraq, and huge guys in suits that everybody, you could tell, instant respect when they showed up. And we were taken with them, and we were told to get on the floor, and they put hoods over our heads. But strangely, at that point, it seemed we were in official hands again, and not in the chaos of being taken by the other people. So that, even though these guys, again, reeked of danger, like, you could tell, these were professional men that we were with now. And they just said, don't talk.
Were they speaking English to you?
One of them was, yeah.
Okay.
If I remember rightly.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were driven to Basra, which is the southern city, the largest southern city in Iraq. And we spent a night there. And again, memory of waking up exhausted because the adrenaline from all of the day. It was kind of like this conference room we were put in. We just slept on the floor. And again, everywhere in Iraq, there's big pictures of Saddam. And I remember waking up and seeing this grinning Saddam, you know, huge painting looking down on me. And I'm like, oh, here we go. This is real now.
Yeah, because when you go to bed, you might just wake up and be like, oh, that was a terrible dream.
Yeah, or just, hey, these guys are going to come to their senses, and
right.
This is just a stupid mistake, and maybe they just sorted everything out. But then we were told that we were going to be driven to Baghdad that day, and the same guys took us, and it was, I think, 7 or 8 hours in a car, no AC. And then, we got driven to Baghdad. A few things happened on the way there, nothing. Once we got to the outskirts of Baghdad, they put the blinds on us again, and we were taken to this, what felt like a underground car park, which in a sense it was, and probably went 3 levels down. I was counting, trying to remember things. I would always remember those old war movies of trying to remember your steps,
right?
What you hear,
right?
So I remember like at least 3 levels down, and then being handed off to a jailer down there, and we were separated at that point, put into separate cells, and we had I think 7 days of interrogation in that place, and it was again a macabre secret police building, and solitary confinement, no real concept of night and day because we were underground, and questioning around the clock about who we were and what we were doing, basically.
So every time that door would open up, you didn't know what was coming through?
No.
Did they feed you at all, or?
Kind of. It was kind of warm, stale water and this burnt rice that we would never really get the taste out of my mouth because it had this distinct smell to it. So it was almost like when you burn rice, it becomes like a Frisbee. So obviously they cooked it in this huge pot and just gave it to us that way. So it was really, I couldn't really eat it. So food deprivation, dehydration, sets in pretty quick, and it was hot. Remember, there's no, it's getting summertime and you're underground.
Yeah.
And we just had a metal cot to sleep on, and we had to wear these pajamas that we were supposed to pick from this room, and there was like a floor full of pajamas. And I remember you had to take all your clothes off and walk around and try and find these pajamas, and they were all dirty, but you had to find what looked like the cleanest. But the lice laid all their eggs in those pajamas. Who knows how many people had worn those things and for how long. And so the lice, after a couple of days, started on our skin and mostly in our armpits and head. So you're just covered in these things. It was pretty gruesome at that point. So they would actually come in response to your question, they would come into the cell blindfolded and then take us on long walks through the buildings to different rooms. And we were interrogated by different people, which I've heard is a tactic to disorientate you. So we never knew who we were going to get.
Yeah.
Somebody could speak perfect English. Somebody would have a translator. There might be 5 people in the room. Sometimes we were allowed the blindfold off. Sometimes we weren't. But the comforting thing throughout that interrogation is we didn't have anything to hide. And I've read subsequent books from military guys that are actually trying to hide information, and it gets a lot worse. I think, with their professional, trained interrogators, they knew early on that we didn't have anything.
Yeah, you were just kids.
We're just kids.
Yeah.
And we that way you don't mess up your story, right?
Right.
But the threat was we were going to have to sign something to say we were spies. And that was their goal. And we weren't going to do that. I wasn't going to do that.
Yeah.
And they started getting frustrated towards the end of that 7 days that they told me Kai had already signed it. Again, they do that tactic.
Yeah.
But I wasn't going to go down for espionage because the year before, a British journalist, had been hung in Iraq for espionage. I remember once walking on one of those interrogation walks, and they shoved us very quickly to the ground, mid-corridor, because it was almost like you're passing past all these office buildings. You'd hear the typewriters and the chatter, and then everything went deadly quiet, and they shoved us really fast on the ground, and then this entourage of people walked past. You get pretty good with your senses when you can't see things. And they stopped very right by us. And it was almost like time stopped, and then they continued walking. So I really believe that was either not Saddam probably himself, but his sons, one of his sons, because he ran the secret police.
Right.
But yeah, it was bizarre and felt like I hate to use the word cliche, it felt like a movie, a really bad movie.
Yeah.
That we were stuck in.
So you get 7 or 8 days of interrogation, and then you're brought into the courtroom?
Yeah, that's right. We were actually taken to a very bizarre courthouse like you'd see here.
Yeah.
Apart from there was 4 judges sitting up high up, above everybody. One of the other prisoners who I met later, hostages, sorry, should I say, was actually taken to a military court. This seemed like a civilian court we were tried in. We had a translator with us, and it went on for about 2 hours, and we kept hearing things like MI5, CIA, Mossad. They're the only really British words that we can hear. And I kept looking down at him and saying, you need to say something, man, because he was just sitting there. And then eventually we were told to stand up, and the translator said, "Oh, shit." And I went, "Oh, shit, that doesn't sound good." And he goes, "Yeah, you just got 8 years in prison." And I said, "For espionage?" He said, "No, for illegal entry into Iraq."
Dang.
So then everything went blurry. My legs started going. The whole thing was finally like tunnel vision, like what is going on? And I remember like shouting and yelling at these people, the judges, and we got dragged out and put back in the van.
Is that because you still had hope at this point of, okay, this is just, they're going to find out that we were just kids. We were just up there doing something stupid, and the British government's going to come in, or someone's going to come in, and we're going to get this all, cleaned up, and I'm going to go back to my life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then in that moment when they say 8 years in an Iraqi prison.
Right. And you're 23, that there's always hope, because what happens when you grow up in a country of, a Western civilization that has what we generally, rely on the legal system as mostly fair.
Mm. Were you given any type of phone call or talk to any type of government?
No, we hadn't seen anyone at this point. So basically we were missing for 7 days, maybe closer to 10. But the UN stepped forward after about 48 hours and said they'd seen us getting taken. So our boss in Kuwait knew, and then he contacted our parents. But they didn't know where we were until we got that sentence. And then it got released, and the story started appearing in the newspapers.
Yeah.
But that night we went back to the interrogation place. And I thought I was going to have to do 8 years solitary in that hellhole place. And it's a really good perspective for me in life now, because that was probably the lowest point in my life, and still will be, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Other things happen in life, but that was a real I don't think I can do this for 8 years situation.
Yeah.
How am I going to do it? Where am I going to get the strength? And the other perspective that came from that was the guards there had been nothing but bad, since we'd got there, less than friendly. And that night, we had a little hatch where, cliche, where food and stuff would be put in. Somebody opened it that night, and it was kind of like, "Hey, psst, psst, come here." Lowest point of my life, where I'm thinking 8 years and, in this dark, horrible place. And he drops, or she, I don't know, a person dropped 2 oranges in and a couple of cigarettes with some matches. And, it doesn't sound like much, but when you've had barely any food and bad water, I got really sick about day 4 as well, where I almost got delirious. When you get something like an orange that tastes, even after 7 days of no nourishment, it was just an incredible human moment.
Yeah.
And I smoked the cigarettes, and they tasted amazing. And it was just and then as I was eating the orange, he calls me back to the door again, and he says in English, "Don't worry, tomorrow you go to a better place." So then I could go to bed that night and go, okay, wherever I'm going, it's going to be better than this place.
Yeah.
So again, when you think of humanity, of how bad they are, and you could go down that path, something like that happens where...
Just that one little moment of human kindness.
Right. And I often wonder who that was. Maybe I'm not supposed to know, but it was, somebody that could have potentially gotten in a lot of trouble for what he did. Yeah. But just those few words got me through that night, and I knew I could do this now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then you're taken over to Abu Ghraib.
Yeah, that was the next thing. In the morning, the two big guards, the Macabre guys, showed up grinning, and we said, "Where are we going?" Because we knew we were getting out of that place then, because we were back in the van, and I'm back in my beach shorts and t-shirt. That's all of the clothes we had that we'd been taken.
Yeah.
So I'm going to show up at the most infamous prison, one of the most in the world, in beach shorts. And he looks back and smiles and goes, "You're going to Abu Ghraib." And we all knew about Abu Ghraib. If you're from, I'd lived in Dubai. Everyone knew it was infamous.
Yeah.
But it still felt better. I was like, okay, now I can prepare how I'm going to survive 8 years in Abu Ghraib as opposed to being in that place. We had to give all our stuff to them, their passports and everything. It was just like normal check-in for, hey, here's your new prison.
Right.
But it was run by the army, the Republican Guard. So it was a serious place.
Yeah.
And we were taken to a cell with about, it must be 80 to 90 people in, first of all, huge room. And I remember thinking then, okay, this is a whole new danger now, because I'm amongst the population and I'm Caucasian, very Caucasian,
right,
and the only Westerner.
Yeah.
Well, with Kai, a few senior, older prisoners made room for us to sit down because there's barely any room to sit down. They all had these mats to lie on, and that's where they did the whole sentence. Some of these guys in this huge, and they would bring in a huge slop bucket for soup or whatever it was they gave them, and water. And I think they only opened the thing for the bathroom, or maybe there was a hole in the ground, but it was only open twice a day or something.
Yeah.
So you had to regulate, So but then they came and got us, and we got taken to another section.
Yeah.
And it was called the Westerners, not Westerners, it was the political section. And we were held, as I walk in, there's another British guy that walks up to me. And the cells, it was like an L shape, all individual cell, double cells, I think. Because I was with Kai. And he comes up and he's like, "Hey, we heard you guys were coming." Because obviously word got around the prison that we were in the interrogation side. And I'm just like, wow, I'm so pleased to see you.
Nice to see someone, huh?
Then there was another Brit in there called Michael. That was Paul that introduced himself to me. And then we met 3 Swedes. They all came out. And we got big bear hugs from those guys. And we looked like absolute crap,
Yeah.
Dare I say beard in those days at 23, but yeah, probably close. And then we were given a cell. And it was me and Kai in one cell. And we started meeting everybody then, and it was part of we were briefed by the other hostages that we were part of a hostage shield. And all these guys had mostly been taken in that same area of the border. And Saddam was going to try and extort money from our governments for us.
Yeah.
If not money, we were told for the lifting of the UN sanctions.
So he was trying to use you guys as pawns for money or some other purpose.
Right.
Yeah.
So as you can tell, that was a big interruption to my flying career at that point.
Yeah. Well, let's kind of summarize your stay. So you were sentenced to 8 years, but you had people back home working to get you out.
We did. Right? There was a big press campaign that was built in. We had the little transistor radios at the time, so we could get BBC World Service, and we would listen to that all the time, and we were often mentioned on there. So we knew the story was, that was hopeful.
Yeah, it was out there.
Yep. So, and to cut a long story short, eventually the Swedes were released. Their king at the time, King Gustav, was prepared to either pay or release medical supplies under the sanctions, and they got out about halfway through my sentence, I think, or my time there.
Yeah.
And then an American, Ken Beatty, who was an oil worker, got released. And so we saw the momentum going.
Yeah.
And our governments had been, the US and the British governments had been very clear to say they don't negotiate. And they will not negotiate for hostages.
Did you still have dreams of flying?
We had a magazine there that was a motorcycle magazine. And there was a picture in there of the guy riding up through the mountains. And when you're in prison, I think one of the hardest things that hits that people don't realize when you've had your freedom all your life is that freedom taken away. and it's very shocking. And I think a lot of prison time is not really focused on that because of the dangers of actually being in prison. But the thing that really hurts that you can't get rid of is that you don't have freedom. And, at 23, knowing I had this whole life ahead of me, and a lot of it seemed like a lot of it might go, this motorcycle represented me like that picture of freedom. And I swore to myself I'd ride a motorcycle through the mountains when I got out. And I also swore that I'd be a pilot. And I'd make it happen, whatever.
Yeah.
And those two things I made happen.
Yeah.
And stuck to them.
Yeah. It's almost, I think that's probably in the same vein of people who lose their health, right? Like we just take so much for granted until it's gone. And then we're like, wait a second, but I just had it.
Yeah.
It's kind of an interesting concept.
Yeah. And it's something I wish I had a better day-to-day perspective on, because it goes as a human, but this, right? Everything.
Right.
And to get upset at small things when something so valuable as your freedom. And I knew guys in there and have subsequently been in contact with them that were on 20, 30-year sentences, and that's a lifetime there.
Yeah. So did you have hope during those eight months? I mean, were you given hope by listening to the radio and hearing that and seeing other people? Is that what kind of gave you that hope to keep on going?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, being around other Westerners, that was all hopeful.
Yeah.
We had a good friendship system there. We supported each other. We were generally kept out of the mess of the Republican Guard stuff that you had to be really careful of.
Yeah.
They weren't happy. They'd just lost a war. They were out for revenge.
Yeah. In
particular, one guard was very much like that, where even if you looked at him the wrong way, you had to be really careful.
Yeah.
But yeah, the hope was there, and then when things started happening, we got a word after this interview from a high up Iraqi Ba'ath Party member that if we got in contact with certain people, or our parents got in contact, they came to Iraq to meet with Saddam, we would be released. And one of the names was Edward Heath, who was an ex-British Prime Minister. He had a good rapport with Saddam, and he agreed. About 2 weeks later, they got back to my parents and said, yeah, he's agreed, he'll help.
So if he goes to Baghdad, you guys would be released.
That was what we were told.
Okay.
So he needed to talk personally to Saddam Hussein, and so we held our breath. We were listening to the BBC World Service, and it said, Edward Heath is on his way out to Baghdad. And then we were, the next day, we again held our breath, because anything can happen there, right? And we realized that. It was so bizarre how rumors, percolate because there's nothing else to do in prison.
Yeah.
It's literally like, what can we make up today that's going to make everybody hopeful or annoyed?
Yeah.
And then they whisked us out of prison one night. They came in and took us and got thrown in the back of a Mercedes, blacked out Mercedes, and a convoy took us to a building. And it was a safe house, a villa, in the suburbs of Baghdad somewhere. That was actually one of the most nervous times I've been, because we were with the secret police then, and they were not acting very nice to us. And I thought, okay, it'd suck. We just got out of prison, and now we get executed by these guys. So it was a really nervous night that night. I barely slept. And the next morning, we got driven to another place, and Edward Heath showed up. So, Sir Edward Heath now. Well, he's passed now, and he just walked in the room. And of course, this is a gentleman I've seen on BBC News my whole life, mostly. And I was like, wow. And he said, happy birthday, Simon. And it was my birthday.
Your 24th birthday?
24th birthday, December 10th, yeah. So, everything came together. And then Saddam laid on his personal helicopter to fly us all to, I say that like he did it nicely. Thanks.
Gee, thanks, guy. Yeah.
Yeah, the foreign minister was actually at the airport as we boarded the plane, and we had to walk past him.
Yeah.
And as we walked past, I'm trying to remember his name, but he was the one filmed when they gassed the Kurds while we were there, going around kicking people in the face. It was on the news. He was not a particularly nice man, but we had to walk past him, and he said something like, next time you come here, make sure you bring your passport.
Oh, wow.
And then you don't have to be rescued like this again.
Yeah.
And like every core in my body just wanted to say, you know, go, yourself. But I didn't. We just smiled, got on the helicopter and got out of there.
When I watched, there's some footage out there of the three of you, right? And I don't know if it's just the way that I see it, but it's almost like you guys are all still trying to process what's going on, because it must have been just for 8 months, even as bad as prison was, there's kind of a routine there. Now suddenly it's, you're now back into the world. What was that feeling? What was that experience for you as you went through that?
Well, I think shock in a different way. Like you're on helicopters, whisked away. Even that experience after being in a mundane prison, mostly mundane, experience. And then there was a quite a large media circus when we got to Jordan. And I think everybody was really shocked by that. Like hundreds of people screaming and shouting. And then you want to literally, your mom comes up to give you a hug and they're like, okay, you have to go do an interview with Edward Heath. The BBC want to interview, and you're just kind of like, what's going on?
Right.
People have said I seemed calm in that video, and I don't think I was. I just think it was more like shock, and disbelief that it was actually happening.
Yeah.
Because everything's rumor, like, oh, you're getting out, and now, okay, I think we're here, we're actually out. So Richard Branson put on a plane for the other two Brits, or for me, if I wanted to fly back to England, but I didn't want to go back to England. The media was something I really didn't want, and plus my home was in Dubai, so we got taken away by the British Embassy, and I got debriefed for I think 3 to 4 days. Had dinner with the ambassador and all that stuff, and just remember thinking, I just want to get home. That's all I wanted to do. Yeah. And I wanted to be anonymous, he says during a podcast 30 years later.
Yeah.
But I did. I wanted just to get on with life. And I think my experience, Paul, the other Brit, wrote a book recently.
Is that Paul Ride?
Yes, it is. Very good book. I think I read it in a day right there on my sofa.
Yeah.
And because it really... it cemented a lot of the things I saw there that my brain had cleverly put to the back of, that didn't happen. And I'm really glad I read that, because it was like, God, I knew that happened.
I think it's easy just to kind of hear a story and now we see you sitting here and we think, oh, yeah, well, that was just an experience, but how do you process that?
Again, I think my age really worked in my benefit for that. I was 23. I was unattached. I didn't have a family. Paul had a baby at home that he didn't see he was there for almost 2 years.
Wow.
Those things can really impact you on a different level. My military boarding school prepared me for a lot of that. Like, toughness wasn't an issue.
Yeah.
Put me on a metal cart, I'll be like, okay. And I know, but now if you put me in that situation with 2 children and luxuries around me,
yeah,
I think it would be a much more difficult and a different situation.
Yeah.
Because you accumulate what you lose, right? Love, family. At 23, I had my family and I missed them dearly, but everything else was doable.
Yeah.
I think it's a very British mindset, and maybe to a point American mindset of males from our generation. I might be ahead of your generation.
No, we're the same. I
was trying to be kind.
We're the same. Thank you. I appreciate it.
But it really was don't really talk about it. Just get on with it.
Yeah.
And my life has been very much like that. The reason I recently started doing some publicity for this is probably, I have had a process of getting this out, and that's my book that I've been working on for a long time.
Yeah.
Other projects are taking, I'd say, organically taking shape. I really don't like that word that much, but they are, with getting in contact with ex-hostages again. And I think that's going to be a really good closure process for this.
Yeah.
The flying in my life is my job, my kids, everything I'm really grateful for and worked hard for. But this side of it is, kind of like what Paul did. You got to get it out.
Yeah.
And in a healthy way.
Yeah. Do your kids ever ask you about it? Or are they too young to kind of share, those types of, parts of your life yet?
I don't think my kids so much. It's interesting if it comes out amongst maybe their cousins have asked, slightly older than them.
Yeah.
And they're just kind of like, whoa, that's right. That was you. That happened to you. But I don't think it really processes for them. I've actually had family members that for 25 years have never even asked me about it. And I don't blame people for that, because it's not, I think we all live in a nice place. And to bring that into a dinner party conversation, I very quickly learned to give a Hollywood version of everything.
Yeah. And
that's fine. But that also means that I want to get the story out there.
Right.
Eventually.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about your flying after you got out of there. So you get out on your 24th birthday. Where then do you go? Do you go back to the Emirates? Do you go to Oklahoma? Where does your journey then to kind of get back into the flight deck and back into flying again?
Yeah, it actually happened pretty fast. I went back to, Oklahoma to do the instrument commercial, and then came back to Dubai, thinking I had a job on a Beech 1900, but that never played out. So I was kind of over there with, again, all these licenses, but no time. And luckily, a couple of Emirates captains offered me a job on their Cessna 207. And I said, how many hours do you need? And they said 500. I said, I got 501. That's a true story.
Really?
And that was for insurance purposes.
Incredible. Well, it was perfect, right?
Yeah. And they said, okay, we can't pay you much. And I said, I'll do it for free. I don't care. I just need the hours. And they said, we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
We'll pay you $1,000 a month. I think it was $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
But it was great flying. It was all VFR, of course. It's in Dubai, but it was good experience.
So tell me about your interview with SkyWest.
Yeah. I think certain people have been really helpful. Larry, definitely in my career at Alaska. And another person called Antonio Wysong was an instructor with me in Washington, D.C. when I was doing some flight instructing prior to 9/11 and after 9/11. And she got hired at SkyWest and then went to Delta. And I was all for going to Atlantic Coast Airlines because I was East Coast based.
Yeah.
And I actually got hired there. And
then that flying the Jetstream out there?
Yeah, it was the 41 I got hired for.
Nice.
But my flight school, it was owned by a ACA captain, and we were doing all the sim prep for it.
Okay.
So I was doing that every day. So I went for the interview. It was a no-brainer. But then the independence thing happened. Yeah. And they stopped all the classes.
That was when they bought the one Airbus and they were going to do the Airbus operation. Right. Yeah.
And they turned the RJs into something fancy.
That's right.
With leather seats and everything. Luckily, when that happened in 2003, as you remember, not many people were hiring after 9/11. And she had put my resume in without me knowing to SkyWest and said, this guy's going to be a really good fit. Kind of like the work Larry did to get me in Alaska. Really pushed it.
Yeah.
And just, good influential people in your life that help you out at certain points in time. And I got called for the interview and interviewed there. And again, it was not many people were getting hired in those interviews. Yeah. I remember sitting there with United guys, American guys that had been furloughed. And I think the difference with a flight instructor that got stuck, I wouldn't say stuck, but extended period of flight instructing was you're eager to get something. And I knew that, like you said, ACA and for me, SkyWest were the two I wanted to go to. And even back then, I was a little older, so I knew I didn't want to take the first thing that came. I wanted to have a quality experience.
Yeah.
And in the interview, I really saw there was 2 of us left out of, I think, 10. Kind of like Alaska odds back in the day. I shouldn't say back in the day. I only got hired in 15, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was a lot harder.
It was tough.
Yeah.
I mean, these last few years have kind of skewed the expectation, but for decades,
Yeah.
it was very, very difficult.
Yeah. And again, Alaska, once I did my 12 years at SkyWest, again, Antonio was trying to get me into Delta, and things were really happening on that side. She was an assistant chief pilot in Atlanta at that point. So I had good contacts at Delta, and then, I started, this was an interesting take as well. I started seeing the guys at Alaska that I knew that had gone from SkyWest, and they were all really good guys. And you probably know a bunch of them. And I remember thinking, there's something about this. And then I also realized I had an Orange County base. And I was just like, things started happening for Alaska. I had about 8 or 9 guys that were going to bat for me.
Yeah.
Larry being one of them.
Yeah.
And after about, back then it was probably a year and a half, 2 years of job fairs and being patient and thinking to yourself, well, this is probably never going to happen, but getting your face there, getting, people to go in with your resume to chief pilots and stuff. I got the interview.
Yeah.
And I've been very happy and grateful since then. It's been a great ride.
Didn't you meet Larry on one of our flights?
I did. He was going to Cabo, and we were both sitting in the back. I was with SkyWest still, and we were both non-Revan, or what,
Yeah.
And we were opposite on the aisles together, and we just started chatting. And, in typical Larry fashion, he, at the end of the flight, said, "Look, I'll help you out, man. You seem like a good guy."
It's gold to have those people who are willing to,
Right.
Anyone who's watching this who maybe feels like they're in a rut, they're in a low place, they're feeling like they just can't move forward, whether it's aviation or anywhere in life.
Mm-hmm.
What message would you give to those people?
Well, obviously, don't give up. I know that's easier said than done, and I think without my prison story, I would say even before then, it's all of us at this level of flying have reached that point that we thought about giving up. I would say with flying in particular, I know you said in life in general, but in flying, it helps to have that passion. I think that's what gets us all through. Listen to that passion. And the one thing I've learned in this country is if you really want to do something, it's available. If you're in that rut, once you get to the other side, if you go down a path of learning from it, you'll be a better person from it.
Where did you go on the motorcycle ride?
I bought a house in Evergreen in Colorado when I was based there in Denver with SkyWest. And, I lived in Denver for a bit, and I was like, it doesn't feel like the mountains. The mountains are way over there.
Yeah.
So I moved up to Evergreen, and I bought a motorcycle and used to ride up in the Rockies.
Incredible, right?
It was freedom.
Just kind of as we get kind of ready to close out here, I just want you to look at these pictures.
Yeah.
And what message would you have for that kid?
Wow. Well, lots happened. That's a whole new story with my parents.
Yeah.
I'd say keep hugging them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I had. How about that?
Mm.
Keep the people closest to you close, because they're right there, right? They were there when I got off the plane.
Yeah.
Helicopter.
Yeah. Probably a little bit different perspective now as you have your own kids, right? Imagine the happiness and relief that they felt to be able to see you again.
You almost got me a little choked up there, man.
Life happens so fast.
Yeah.
And in the blink of an eye, we're where we are.
Yep.
Right?
Beautiful. Thank you.
Anyway, we should say thank you. When we first talked and you started telling this story, I said, wait a second, time out. I don't want any details because I want to hear it at the same time that everyone else does. And it's an incredible story. And I'm super excited for your book. I think that's gonna provide some amazing insights and lessons. And so, is there a place where people can go right now to kind of follow along with your journey?
Yeah, actually, this is all kind of taken momentum. Good timing for this as well, even though you and I had this set up before. But we just opened a website yesterday.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Wow, that is perfect timing.
And guess what happened? As soon as I hit submit for the website, we had an earthquake here yesterday. It was really, really weird.
Yeah.
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 I don't know. I told you that.
That's right. It was the gods answering back, saying yes.
Yes, finally,
Simon, do it.
30 years in the
30
waiting.
years, do it.
It's a 30-year project. So, anyway, it's No Borders is the name of the book that we've decided on. I've decided on. I like to make it sound like I have a team. There's just two of us. No Borders, a memoir.com.
So we'll put all that info down there in the description. But
okay.
Thank you so much for taking the time, for sitting down with us, for sharing your story with everyone. I'm just truly honored that you did it here. So
Thanks,
appreciate
Ben.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.